In the heart of downtown Springfield, Illinois, the morning sun cast long shadows through the towering glass windows of the old courthouse, a building that had witnessed countless battles between justice and privilege. Today, it was the stage for another confrontation that would grip the community's attention, a high-profile juvenile assault case involving one of the city's most talked-about families. Before we delve into this heart-wrenching account, make sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up. We want to hear your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the unfolding events, and where are you tuning in from? Your engagement is what drives us to bring these compelling stories to light. 17-year-old Liam Carter entered the courtroom with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, his tailored blazer sitting perfectly over a crisp shirt. His steps echoed softly on the marble floor as he made his way to the defendant's table, his gaze steady but distant. Whispering under his breath, almost as if to reassure himself, he muttered, "My dad will fix this." The words hung in the air, a quiet promise tinged with desperation and belief in a power that money and influence could command. The room buzzed with attention that was palpable. Journalists scribbled notes feverishly, cameras flashed intermittently, and spectators whispered in hushed tones. The whispered murmur was laced with speculation and judgment. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity, a testament to the public's hunger for answers. At the center of it all stood Liam, a young man whose reputation as the privileged son of Robert Carter preceded him. Robert Carter was a name that carried weight far beyond the city limits. A prominent local businessman, his empire spanned real estate, finance, and political connections. Known for his ironclad grip on the city's business landscape and his influence in local government, Robert was a man who could bend situations to his favor with unsettling ease. To many, his presence in the courtroom was a reminder of the divide between the powerful and the ordinary, a symbol of privilege that often seemed impenetrable. As Liam settled into his seat, his father arrived shortly afterward, entering with the assured stride of a man used to commanding attention. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, Robert's presence was magnetic and intimidating. His sharp eyes scanned the courtroom, briefly meeting the gaze of the prosecution team before settling on his son with an unreadable expression. The subtle nod he gave Liam was a silent affirmation. Help was on the way. The courtroom itself was a blend of old-world grandeur and modern scrutiny. Dark wood paneling lined the walls, and the judge's bench loomed high above, draped in the solemnity of the law. The gallery was packed with a cross-section of Springfield's residents, some drawn by the sensationalism of the case, others by a genuine desire for justice. Among them, familiar faces from local schools, social gatherings, and neighborhoods whispered anxiously about what was to come. The judge, a seasoned woman known for her no-nonsense approach, called the court to order with a firm bang of her gavel. Her voice cut through the murmurs, demanding attention and respect. We are here today to begin proceedings in the case of the state of Illinois versus Liam Carter, she announced, her tone steady but carrying the weight of the moment. Let this court serve as a reminder that justice is blind, and all individuals, regardless of status, are subject to the law. Despite the judge's declaration, the undercurrent of tension suggested otherwise. The presence of the Carter family was a constant reminder to the public that this case was more than just about one young man. It was a test of whether influence could sway the scales of justice. Reporters leaned forward, capturing every detail, every glance exchanged between the defense and prosecution. Liam's defense attorney, a seasoned litigator named Sarah Mitchell, took her place at the table. Known for her sharp mind and unyielding dedication to her clients, Sarah's calm demeanor contrasted with the storm brewing outside the courtroom walls. She whispered something to Liam, who nodded, his fingers tightening briefly around the edge of the table. The subtle interaction was a snapshot of the fragile alliance between a privileged youth and the legal machinery trying to shield him. Across the aisle, the prosecution team prepared their files, their faces resolute. Lead prosecutor Daniel Reyes was a man driven by a deep sense of justice, his reputation built on holding powerful figures accountable. He glanced toward the defendant with a mixture of determination and empathy, aware that this case was as much about public perception as it was about the facts. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had begun to gather, their voices a mix of outrage and curiosity. News vans lined the street, reporters broadcasting live feeds that captured the collective unease permeating Springfield. Banners and signs calling for fairness and transparency fluttered in the breeze, a silent but powerful reminder that the community was watching closely, unwilling to let this case slip quietly into the shadows. Within the courtroom, the moments before the hearing began were thick with anticipation. Liam's whispered mantra echoed faintly in his mind, a tether to the belief that his father's power would shield him from the storm. Yet, beneath the surface of that confidence, subtle signs of anxiety flickered, an unsteady breath, a fleeting glance toward the courtroom doors, as if searching for an escape. The judge called the first procedural matters, setting the tone for what promised to be a contentious trial. As lawyers exchanged documents and laid out preliminary objections, the courtroom settled into a rhythm that masked the undercurrent of unease. The case was no longer just about the assault charge. It was a stage where privilege, power, and the pursuit of justice collided. As the proceedings unfolded, whispers rippled through the gallery. Some spectators expressed disbelief that Liam Carter, raised in comfort and privilege, could be entangled in such a violent incident. Others questioned whether his status would grant him leniency unfairly denied to others. The courtroom became a microcosm of a larger debate playing out across Springfield. Could justice truly be blind in the face of wealth and influence? Liam remained stoic, his eyes fixed forward, but the courtroom's weight pressed heavily on him. The promise whispered moments ago, "My dad will fix this," was both a shield and a shackle. It was a belief that carried him through the scrutiny but also deepened the isolation, as if he were caught in a world where his fate was no longer entirely his own. The day's hearings concluded with little resolution, the case set to move forward amid mounting media attention and community scrutiny. As the courtroom emptied, the sense of a brewing storm lingered, a reminder that this was only the beginning of a battle that would test the limits of justice in Springfield. Outside, Robert Carter's presence remained a looming force. Whether his influence would tip the scales or whether justice would prevail remained an open question, one that the city awaited with bated breath. And at the center of it all stood Liam Carter, a young man caught between the promises of power and the harsh light of accountability. The night of the incident was meant to be a celebration, a gathering of youth and laughter at a sprawling suburban home just outside Springfield. What began as a typical high school party spiraled into chaos, leaving a community reeling and a young man facing charges that would shatter the illusion of privilege surrounding his name. Liam Carter, known among peers for his charismatic yet sometimes reckless demeanor, had attended the party with a group of friends. The house was filled with music and chatter, the kind of youthful energy that masks the unpredictability beneath. But as the evening wore on, tensions simmered beneath the surface, fueled by alcohol and the collision of rival social groups. According to multiple eyewitness accounts, the violence erupted suddenly, a clash triggered by a heated argument over a trivial misunderstanding. What was initially a verbal confrontation escalated rapidly into physical blows exchanged in the dimly lit backyard. Liam, caught in the melee, was seen striking Marcus Hill, a respected high school athlete whose presence at the party had been unassuming until that moment. Police were dispatched to the scene shortly after a frantic 911 call reported a fight turning violent. Officers arrived to find a chaotic scene, overturned chairs, broken glass, and several youths scattered across the yard, nursing bruises and shock. Amid the confusion, Liam was detained without resistance, his expression unreadable as officers led him away from the scene. Onlookers whispered among themselves, some in disbelief that the son of Robert Carter could be involved in such brutality. Marcus Hill, the victim, was rushed to the hospital with injuries that, while not life-threatening, were severe enough to warrant immediate medical attention. Known for his dedication to athletics and his quiet leadership on the school's football team, Marcus's family was blindsided by the news. The Hill household, usually filled with the sounds of celebration and encouragement, was instead gripped by worry and disbelief as they grappled with the reality of their son's attack. Marcus's mother, Angela Hill, was among the first to speak publicly about the incident. Her voice, steady yet laced with pain, conveyed the family's shock and their demand for justice. "Marcus is a good kid, someone who's never been in trouble," she said in a press conference the following morning. "To see him hurt like this is heartbreaking. We want the truth, and we want accountability, no matter who is involved." The community's reaction was swift and divided. Many who knew Liam from his privileged circles struggled to reconcile the image of the carefree, well-mannered teenager with the violent actions alleged that night. Rumors swirled, some suggesting that the incident was an unfortunate mistake blown out of proportion, while others feared it was a disturbing glimpse into a deeper sense of entitlement. At school, the mood was tense. Students whispered in hallways, some expressing sympathy for Marcus and others quietly defending Liam, caught in the complex web of teenage loyalty and social standing. Teachers and administrators worked to maintain order, but the incident left a mark on the school's atmosphere, casting a shadow over what should have been a routine semester. The police investigation was thorough and swift. Detectives interviewed numerous witnesses, piecing together a timeline that placed Liam at the center of the altercation. Surveillance footage from nearby homes and traffic cameras provided additional evidence, capturing moments of the confrontation and the immediate aftermath. The physical evidence, including injuries documented by medical personnel, painted a grim picture of the night's violence. When Liam was formally charged with assault, the news sent shock waves through Springfield. The legal documents describe the incident with stark clarity. A violent altercation resulting in bodily harm, with Liam as the primary aggressor. The charges carried significant consequences, especially given the public nature of the case and the victim's standing in the community. Legal experts noted the unusual nature of a juvenile case attracting such attention, particularly one involving a defendant from a family as influential as the Carters. The charges against Liam challenged the notion that wealth and status could insulate someone from the law's reach, setting the stage for a courtroom battle that extended far beyond the facts of the assault itself. Meanwhile, the Hill family prepared for a difficult legal process, determined to see justice served. Angela Hill became a vocal advocate not only for her son, but also for all victims of youth violence, speaking at community forums and rallying support for tougher enforcement of juvenile offenses. Her resolve resonated with many who felt the need for accountability in a case that seemed to symbolize the tensions between privilege and fairness. Liam's world, once defined by comfort and expectation, began to unravel. The arrest was a jarring intrusion, a public fall from grace that exposed cracks in the carefully constructed image of the Carter family. Friends distanced themselves, unsure of how to navigate the scandal. Social media buzzed with speculation, memes, and heated debates, amplifying the scrutiny faced by the young defendant. Inside the Carter household, the atmosphere was strained. Robert Carter, usually a commanding presence, faced the challenge of managing a crisis that threatened both his family's reputation and his influence. Privately, he met with legal counsel and advisors, plotting a course to protect his son and contain the damage. Publicly, his appearances were calculated, projecting control even as the storm grew. Liam, meanwhile, grappled with the reality of his arrest and the charges looming over him. The belief that his father's power could shield him was both a source of comfort and a looming pressure. Schoolmates who once admired him now regarded him with suspicion or disdain. The carefree days of parties and privileges were replaced by the stark confines of a juvenile detention center as he awaited his first court appearance. The police report detailed the sequence of events with clinical precision: the initial altercation, the escalation to physical violence, and the subsequent intervention by law enforcement. Witness statements painted a picture of confusion and fear, with several attendees recalling the moment when Liam threw the first punch. The victim's injuries, including a fractured cheekbone and multiple contusions, were corroborated by medical examinations. As the investigation unfolded, the community's questions grew louder. How could a young man from one of Springfield's most prominent families be involved in such violence? Would the legal system treat him differently because of who his father was? The answers remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: this case would not fade quietly into the background. The media seized on the story, their coverage blending the facts of the case with analysis of the Carters' influence and the broader implications for justice in Springfield. Headlines questioned whether Liam's arrest was the beginning of true accountability or just a spectacle before the powerful intervened behind closed doors. In the midst of this, Marcus Hill's family prepared for the legal battles ahead, their resolve unshaken. The injury to their son was a painful reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of standing up for justice. Their voices became a rallying cry for fairness, echoing through community meetings local news segments, and social media platforms. For Liam Carter, the arrest marked a turning point, an irreversible step into a world where privilege was no longer a guarantee of protection. The charges loomed as a stark reminder that actions carried consequences, regardless of birthright or influence. As Springfield watched, the story of a violent night at a party unfolded into a complex drama, one where the lines between justice, power, and responsibility blurred under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. As news of Liam Carter's arrest spread, Springfield found itself gripped by a wave of media frenzy and public outcry that transformed a quiet suburban incident into a citywide debate on justice and privilege. Headlines blared across newspapers and television screens, each story dissecting every detail of the case with relentless scrutiny. The question on everyone's lips was clear. Would Liam's family influence the legal outcome, or would justice prevail regardless of his father's power? The media circus began almost immediately after the charges were filed. Reporters camped outside the Carter estate and the courthouse, vying for statements from family members, legal representatives, and community leaders. News anchors framed the story as a clash between the city's elite and its everyday citizens, a narrative that resonated deeply in a town long divided by social and economic lines. Social media became a battleground of opinions. Hashtags calling for accountability trended within hours, and viral posts connected the incident to broader issues of inequality and systemic favoritism. Some users expressed outrage that Liam might escape the full weight of the law, while others defended the teenager, insisting that accusations did not equate to guilt and warning against a rush to judgment. Community groups quickly mobilized, organizing protests demanding transparency and equal treatment under the law. Demonstrators gathered outside the courthouse on multiple occasions, holding signs emblazoned with messages like "Justice for Marcus" and "No one is above the law." Their chants echoed through the streets, a chorus demanding that influence and money not protect the guilty. At a packed city hall meeting, voices rose in passionate debate. Residents from all walks of life voiced their concerns, frustration, and hopes. Many saw the case as emblematic of a deeper problem: how the powerful could manipulate systems meant to protect the vulnerable. Others cautioned against presuming guilt before trial, emphasizing the importance of due process. Among the community's voices was that of Marcus Hill's mother, Angela, who had become a steadfast advocate for poor victims' rights. Her presence at rallies and public forums lent a personal weight to the protests, reminding Springfield that behind the headlines were real people seeking justice. "We aren't asking for special treatment," she told a crowd of supporters. "We're asking for fairness, for the law to be applied equally to every child in this city." The Carter family, meanwhile, found themselves under an intense spotlight. Robert Carter's public appearances were carefully managed, designed to project strength and control. His statements to the press stressed his belief in the legal process while subtly hinting at the importance of a measured response. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a growing unease about how this case threatened to unravel the carefully maintained image of the Carters. Legal analysts speculated openly about the potential influence Robert could wield behind the scenes. His connections to political figures, law enforcement, and local media raised questions about whether the case would be handled impartially. Editorials debated the ethical implications of power in the justice system, with some calling for independent oversight to ensure fairness. In the midst of the turmoil, the prosecution team faced mounting pressure. Lead prosecutor Daniel Reyes was determined to resist any attempts to sway the case. His office released statements affirming their commitment to pursuing the charges without favoritism, emphasizing that the evidence would guide their actions, not public opinion or family status. Reyes's stance earned him both praise and criticism. Supporters hailed him as a champion of justice, willing to stand up against powerful interests. Critics accused him of grandstanding or attempting to politicize the case, but for Reyes, the stakes were personal. He understood that the outcome of this trial would send a message far beyond Springfield's borders about the integrity of the legal system. Within the Carter household, the pressure was palpable. Liam's siblings and extended family members wrestled with conflicting emotions, loyalty, fear, and uncertainty. The family's private gatherings were tense, conversations carefully guarded to avoid fueling further scandal. Some relatives urged Robert to use his influence aggressively. Others warned of potential backlash if the appearance of interference became too blatant. Liam himself found the media attention suffocating. The once privileged teenager now navigated a world where every misstep could be amplified and misconstrued. Friends distanced themselves, wary of association. Online harassment became a daily ordeal, with anonymous voices condemning or defending him without respite. The isolation deepened, leaving him to rely increasingly on his legal team and the fragile promise that his father's power might shield him. Amid the noise, the local schools struggled to maintain order. Administrators implemented programs to address bullying and misinformation, hoping to ease tensions among students. Counselors worked overtime to support those affected by the incident's fallout, both directly and indirectly. For many young people, the case became a stark lesson in the complexities of justice and social inequality. As protests continued and media scrutiny intensified, Springfield's political leaders weighed in cautiously. Some called for calm and patience, urging residents to trust the judicial process. Others took firmer stances, advocating for reforms to prevent future miscarriages of justice. The case had ignited a broader conversation about systemic issues that extended far beyond one event. In editorial rooms and around kitchen tables, the debate raged. Would the Carters' wealth and connections tip the scales? Or was this the moment when Springfield would demonstrate that its legal system could rise above influence and privilege? The question loomed as the city braced for the legal battle ahead. Behind the scenes, the Carter legal defense began crafting strategies to counter the growing public distrust. Public relations consultants were engaged to manage the family's image, while attorneys prepared to challenge evidence and witness testimonies. Their objective was clear: to protect Liam from conviction and preserve the Carter legacy. Yet, the growing public insistence on transparency and accountability complicated those efforts. The media's relentless coverage meant that any perceived attempt to manipulate the case risked igniting further outrage. The fragile balance between legal defense and public perception became a tightrope walk, fraught with risk. The trial date drew closer, and with it, the mounting anticipation. For Springfield, the case had become more than a legal proceeding. It was a referendum on the city's values and the fairness of its institutions. The community's eyes remained fixed on the courthouse, the site where privilege and justice would inevitably collide. Liam Carter, once shielded by the promise of his father's influence, now faced a reality where public opinion and legal scrutiny converged in an unforgiving spotlight. The media frenzy and protests underscored a simple truth. In Springfield, the question was no longer just about what Liam had done that night, but whether justice could be served without fear or favor. Robert Carter arrived at the courthouse on a crisp autumn morning with the unmistakable air of a man accustomed to control. His tailored suit was impeccable, his expression unreadable, yet charged with quiet determination. The heavy oak doors of the Springfield County Courthouse seemed to open for him with a reluctant creak, as if aware that today marked the beginning of a battle far beyond a simple juvenile assault case. His presence dominated the courthouse lobby, a figure both revered and resented in equal measure. Reporters jostled for position, cameras clicking relentlessly as he made his way past them without a word. To the public, Robert was the embodiment of power, the man who could sway decisions with a phone call, whose influence stretched through the city's political and legal corridors like an invisible web. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted palpably as Robert took his seat beside Liam. His arrival was a signal to all involved that the Carter family was mobilizing every resource to protect their own. The defense team, led by veteran attorney Sarah Mitchell, had already begun laying the groundwork for what promised to be a formidable legal campaign. Robert's presence reinforced their strategy, sending a clear message that they were not to be underestimated. In the days leading up to the first hearings, the defense quietly filed a series of motions aimed at negotiating charges and reducing potential penalties. These legal maneuvers hinted at attempts to sidestep the full force of the law, leveraging procedural technicalities and questioning the admissibility of key evidence. The filings, while standard in high-profile cases, carried the unmistakable weight of a family used to bending rules in their favor. Sarah Mitchell, sharp and methodical, orchestrated these moves with precision. She met regularly with Robert and Liam, crafting narratives that sought to humanize her client while casting doubt on the prosecution's portrayal of events. Her approach balanced legal rigor with public relations savvy, aware that the court of public opinion would be just as influential as the actual courtroom. Opposing them was the prosecution team, led by Daniel Reyes, who prepared for a fight that extended beyond legal briefs. Reyes's office coordinated with investigators to shore up evidence and anticipate defense strategies. The prosecutor's resolve was strengthened by the community's demands for accountability, fueling a determination to resist any attempts at undue influence. Behind closed doors, Robert Carter's network of allies was quietly activated. Political contacts, legal consultants, and media advisors conferred in hushed tones, plotting ways to shape the narrative and mitigate damage. The Carters' reputation was at stake, and Robert was not a man to leave outcomes to chance. At a press conference arranged by the Carter family's public relations team, Robert spoke with practiced calm. His words were measured, emphasizing respect for the legal process and his belief in Liam's character. "We trust that the truth will come to light," he stated, carefully avoiding direct commentary on the charges. The statement was crafted to reassure supporters while deflecting criticism, a masterclass in damage control. Legal experts watching the case noted the significance of Robert's early involvement. His active participation signaled that the defense would be aggressive and well-resourced, raising the stakes for the prosecution. Some commentators speculated that the Carters might seek to use plea negotiations or alternative resolutions to avoid a protracted trial, while others warned of the dangers of perceived interference undermining public trust. As the initial hearings commenced, the courtroom became a stage for these competing forces. The defense contested the validity of certain witness testimonies and questioned procedural aspects of the arrest and evidence collection. Each objection and counter-argument was meticulously crafted to chip away at the prosecution's case. Liam sat beside his father and attorney, his demeanor a complex mix of confidence and apprehension. The support from Robert was both a shield and a reminder of the expectations placed upon him. Whispers of, "My dad will fix this," lingered in the air, underscoring the fragile reliance on influence amid a process designed to be impartial. The prosecution countered with firm resolve. Reyes emphasized the integrity of the investigation and the strength of the evidence, pushing back against defense claims. His team presented detailed reports and expert analyses, striving to keep the focus on the facts rather than the family's standing. Outside the courthouse, the public's attention remained intense. Reporters monitored every legal filing and courtroom development, their coverage shaping perceptions and fueling ongoing debates. The defense's legal maneuvers were dissected in editorials and opinion pieces, some praising their tactical expertise, others condemning what they saw as attempts to evade justice. The Carter family's legal strategy extended beyond motions and hearings. Private negotiations with prosecutors hinted at potential plea bargains or alternative sentencing options, though no agreements were publicly disclosed. These behind-the-scenes discussions added another layer of complexity as both sides weighed risks and benefits in a case that had become as much about power as about law. Within the defense team, tensions occasionally surfaced. Some attorneys expressed concern about the delicate balance between aggressive defense and maintaining the family's public image. The stakes were high. Any misstep could amplify community resentment or embolden the prosecution. Meanwhile, Liam grappled with the unfolding reality. The legal wrangling, the media spotlight, and the weight of his family's expectations pressed heavily on him. He found himself navigating a labyrinth of legal jargon and strategies far removed from the carefree life he had known. His father's presence was a steadying force, yet it also underscored the isolation inherent in his predicament. As the weeks passed, the courtroom drama intensified. Each hearing brought new revelations, challenges, and tactical exchanges. The defense's early legal filings set the tone for a protracted battle, signaling that the Carters were prepared to use every available tool to protect their son. For the prosecution, the challenge was to maintain momentum and public confidence in the face of formidable opposition. Reyes's office worked tirelessly to ensure that the case remained grounded in evidence and legal principles, resisting any pressure to soften charges or dismiss key facts. The community watched closely, their hopes and fears entwined with the legal twists and turns. The case had transcended its origins, becoming a symbol of the broader struggle between justice and privilege in Springfield. For many, the question was no longer if Liam Carter was guilty, but whether the law would be applied equally when the defendant was the son of a man like Robert Carter. As the courtroom battles continued, the city braced for the next phase, the trial itself. The legal maneuvers and negotiations had set the stage, But the true test awaited. Could the truth emerge unclouded by power, or would influence prove stronger than evidence? In the tense corridors of the courthouse, the answer remained elusive, hanging in the balance between justice and privilege. The courtroom was thick with anticipation as the hearing progressed into its third hour. Lawyers exchanged arguments with practiced precision, their voices measured and deliberate under the judge's watchful eye. Spectators leaned forward, eyes fixed on the proceedings, a high-stakes drama unfolding where every gesture and word carried weight far beyond the immediate legal matters. Robert Carter sat beside his son, his posture rigid, eyes sharp as he absorbed every development. To the outside world, he was the epitome of control, a pillar of strength in the storm. Yet beneath that veneer, an unease flickered, an undercurrent of tension that even his years of experience could not fully mask. Then, in a moment that rippled through the courtroom like a shock wave, Robert rose abruptly from his seat. His movement was sudden, unexpected, and instantly commanding attention. Without a word, he turned toward the exit and strode purposefully out of the courtroom, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. Time seemed to freeze. Whispers erupted among the audience. Gasps, murmurs, the rustling of papers. Liam's eyes widened, his confident facade cracking as he watched his father's retreating back. The words he had whispered so often, "My dad will fix this," echoed hollowly in his mind, now tinged with a bitter realization. The judge paused, momentarily taken aback by the disruption. "Mr. Carter," she called firmly, "if you would please return to your seat." But Robert did not stop. His departure was resolute, a silent statement that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted palpably. The balance of power, once seemingly anchored by Robert's presence, felt suddenly unmoored. Defense attorneys exchanged hurried glances, their carefully laid plans thrown into sudden uncertainty. Prosecutors leaned forward, their expressions sharpening with newfound confidence. Liam sat frozen, the weight of his father's absence settling onto his shoulders like a physical burden. His mouth opened slightly as if to speak, but no words came. The realization was stark and inescapable, the promise of protection, a shield forged by family influence, had been withdrawn without explanation. Outside the courtroom, reporters scrambled to capture the moment's significance. The news spread swiftly. Robert Carter, the powerful patriarch, had abandoned the hearing mid-session. Speculation ignited like wildfire. Was it a strategic retreat, a sign of internal conflict, or something more ominous? Legal experts weighed in almost immediately. Some suggested that Robert's departure was a calculated move designed to distance himself from the increasingly contentious case. Others posited that it might reflect a fracture within the Carter family's defense strategy, perhaps a sign of waning influence or growing pressure. In the courtroom, the judge called for a brief recess to restore order. During the pause, murmurs filled the hallways as attendees processed the upheaval. Defense attorneys huddled with Liam, their faces drawn and uncertain. The absence of Robert's commanding presence left a vacuum that no one was quite prepared to fill. For Liam, the moment was devastating. The confident youth who had entered the courthouse believing in his father's invincibility now faced a chilling truth. The man whose power he had leaned on had walked away, leaving him to confront the mounting legal storm alone. As proceedings resumed, the prosecution seized the moment. Daniel Reyes addressed the court with renewed vigor, emphasizing the importance of impartial justice and the need for the legal process to proceed untethered from personal influence. His words resonated with the courtroom, reinforcing the community's desire for fairness. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to recalibrate. Without Robert's backing, their arguments lost some of their earlier assertiveness. Sarah Mitchell spoke with measured caution, cautious not to expose cracks in their case, but unable to fully mask the shift in dynamics. In the days that followed, the implications of Robert's departure reverberated beyond the courtroom walls. Media outlets dissected the moment, framing it as a turning point in the case. Editorials questioned whether the Carter family's influence was fracturing under pressure, or if this was a deliberate tactic to manage public perception. Community members expressed a mix of reactions. Some saw Robert's exit as a victory for justice, a sign that even the most powerful were not above accountability. Others wondered what had prompted such an abrupt withdrawal. Was it pressure, a moral reckoning, or a calculated legal maneuver? Inside the Carter household, the atmosphere grew tense. Family members speculated about Robert's reasons, their conversations laden with uncertainty and unease. The once solid front began to show signs of strain as the reality of the legal battle's gravity settled in. Liam's emotional state became a focal point for those around him. Friends and relatives noted a shift. Where once he had displayed bravado, now he exhibited vulnerability and confusion. The absence of his father's protective presence left him adrift, forced to confront a future fraught with uncertainty. Legal commentators continued to analyze the fallout. Some suggested that Robert's departure could embolden the prosecution, removing an obstacle that had loomed large over the case. Others warned that it might complicate defense efforts, forcing a recalibration of strategy and resources. Meanwhile, the courtroom itself remained a charged environment. Each session now carried the added weight of Robert's absence, a silent reminder that the dynamics of power and influence were far from fixed. The judge maintained a firm hand, determined to keep proceedings focused on the facts rather than the spectacle. For Liam, the path ahead was suddenly less certain. The promise whispered in the shadows of the courthouse, "My dad will fix this," had been broken. Alone, he faced the daunting prospect of a trial where the safety net he had counted on was gone, replaced by the stark reality of accountability and consequence. As the case moved forward, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The power dynamics had shifted, the once unshakable presence of Robert Carter replaced by questions and doubt. The community watched closely, sensing that this unexpected moment might mark the beginning of a new chapter, one where justice would be tested against the weight of privilege, and a young man would confront his fate without the armor of his father's influence. In the hushed corridors outside the courtroom, the echoes of Robert Carter's abrupt departure continued to reverberate, sparking a whirlwind of speculation and analysis. Friends, family, legal experts, and the media alike scrambled to decipher the motivations behind a move so unexpected from a man known for his ironclad control over both business and public perception. Some close to the Carter family whispered of mounting pressure that might have forced Robert's hand. Rumors circulated that political allies and influential contacts expressed concern over the growing backlash and media scrutiny, urging restraint to avoid further damage to the family's reputation. These whispers painted a picture of a patriarch caught between his desire to protect his son and the escalating costs of maintaining that shield. Others speculated on a moral conflict simmering beneath the surface. Those who had long observed Robert's public persona suggested that perhaps a moment of conscience had surfaced, a recognition that the legal process needed to proceed unimpeded, even if it meant stepping back. Such a possibility, while uncharacteristic, hinted at the complexity of a man whose personal and public lives were deeply intertwined. Legal commentators weighed in with cautious analysis. Professor Elaine Matthews, a criminal justice expert at Springfield University, noted, Robert Carter's exit could signify a strategic recalibration. It might be an attempt to distance himself, to protect the broader family interests, or to avoid being entangled in potential allegations of undue influence. This move could be as much about optics as it is about legal strategy. Meanwhile, the Carter legal team faced the immediate challenge of reorienting their defense without their most prominent advocate. Sarah Mitchell, the lead attorney, found herself navigating uncharted waters. In private meetings, she expressed a mixture of frustration and resolve, recognizing that the loss of Robert's direct involvement would require a shift in approach, one that emphasized legal merits over familial power. Liam, caught in the middle of this upheaval, grappled with feelings of abandonment and confusion. The young man who had once whispered assurances of his father's intervention was now left to confront the stark reality of his situation without that comfort. His interactions with his remaining family members were tinged with a new wariness, as he sought to understand what Robert's departure meant for his future. Counselors and close friends noted a change in Liam's demeanor. The bravado that had masked his anxieties began to give way to vulnerability. Late-night conversations revealed a young man wrestling not only with the charges against him, but also with the unraveling of the support system he had long taken for granted. The isolation deepened as the media spotlight intensified, leaving Liam adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Within the Carter household, tension simmered. Family members debated the implications of Robert's sudden exit, some viewing it as a prudent move, others as a sign of fracture within the family's united front. Private discussions centered on how to maintain strength and cohesion amid growing public scrutiny and internal doubts. The media seized upon these developments with fervor. News outlets dissected every available detail, framing Robert's departure as a turning point in the case. Headlines speculated on whether this was a sign of weakening influence or a calculated legal maneuver designed to shield the family from greater fallout. Pundits debated the potential fallout, while social media users voiced opinions ranging from triumph to skepticism. Public sentiment mirrored this complexity. For many in Springfield, Robert's exit was a hopeful sign that the justice system might finally operate without interference. Community advocates and activists publicly expressed their support for an impartial trial, seeing the move as an opportunity to level the playing field. Yet, others remained cautious, wary that behind the scenes, influence would continue to shape outcomes regardless of public gestures. The prosecution welcomed the shift with measured optimism. Daniel Reyes and his team viewed Robert's absence as an opening to advance their case without the looming shadow of the Carter patriarch. In court filings and public statements, Reyes emphasized the commitment to pursuing justice based on evidence and law, not intimidation or privilege. His resolve was bolstered by the community's growing insistence on transparency and fairness. However, the legal battle was far from over. Defense attorneys scrambled to adjust their strategy, now tasked with defending Liam without the symbolic and practical support of his father. Internal discussions revealed concerns about maintaining morale and coherence within the defense team, as well as managing the evolving media narrative. Liam's remaining family members stepped into more prominent roles, attempting to fill the void left by Robert. Their efforts were met with mixed results, as the weight of public expectation and private fear pressed heavily upon them. The fragile alliances within the household were tested, with moments of solidarity punctuated by disagreements over the best path forward. Community leaders and legal observers noted the broader implications of this moment. The case had become a microcosm of the challenges facing justice systems across the nation. How to balance the scales when wealth and influence loom large, and whether stepping back from power could genuinely pave the way for fairness. In the courtroom, the judge acknowledged the change in dynamics with a renewed emphasis on procedure and impartiality. Her rulings sought to reinforce the integrity of the process, signaling to all parties that the case would be conducted under the strictest adherence to legal standards. As the trial date approached, Liam faced the daunting prospect of standing alone against a prosecution emboldened by new confidence. The promise once whispered in the shadows, "My dad will fix this," had dissolved, replaced by the harsh light of reality. The young man's journey had shifted from one of assumed protection to one defined by personal accountability and the uncertain path ahead. The community watched with bated breath, aware that the coming weeks would test not only Liam's fate, but the very principles upon which their justice system was built. Robert Carter's departure was more than a single act. It was a catalyst that reshaped the narrative, challenging perceptions of power, loyalty, and the possibility of true justice in Springfield. With Robert Carter's sudden departure from the courtroom still fresh in everyone's minds, the prosecution found itself invigorated, sensing an opening in a case that had long been shadowed by the weight of the Carter family's influence. Daniel Reyes, leading the charge, seized this newfound momentum with a determined focus that echoed through the halls of justice. The atmosphere in the prosecutor's office shifted palpably. Teams of attorneys and investigators pored over evidence with renewed zeal, confident that the scales were beginning to tip. Witnesses who had previously been hesitant to come forward now felt emboldened, their voices carrying more weight as the shadow of power receded. Reyes's strategy was clear. Push forward aggressively, presenting a case grounded in facts, testimony, and irrefutable proof. He understood the stakes, not just for the individuals involved, but for the community's faith in the legal system. The message was unmistakable. No one, regardless of family name or fortune, was beyond accountability. In court, the prosecution's presentation grew steadily more compelling. Eyewitnesses recounted the night's violent altercation with vivid clarity, their testimonies painting a consistent picture of events that placed Liam Carter at the center of the assault. Some witnesses, previously reluctant, now spoke without hesitation, bolstered by the perception that justice was no longer obstructed. A pivotal moment came when video footage from a neighbor's security camera was introduced. The grainy images captured Liam leaving the scene shortly after the confrontation, his demeanor hurried and tense. The footage, though limited in clarity, was a tangible link that prosecutors leveraged to challenge defense claims of innocence or mistaken identity. Medical reports detailing Marcus Hill's injuries were presented with clinical precision. The prosecution emphasized the severity of the assault, highlighting the fractured cheekbone, bruises, and the lasting physical and emotional impact on the victim. These facts resonated deeply with jurors and the public alike, grounding the abstract legal arguments in human consequence. Community members, who had once whispered anxiously about the influence of the Carter family, now found renewed hope in the unfolding trial. The courtroom became a focal point for those demanding transparency and fairness, their presence a silent testament to the community's insistence on impartial justice. Despite the prosecution's surge, the defense remained steadfast. Sarah Mitchell and her team worked tirelessly to counter the mounting evidence, challenging the credibility of witnesses and scrutinizing the circumstances of the arrest and investigation. Their argument sought to introduce doubt, emphasizing Liam's youth, prior good character, and the chaotic nature of the party that night. However, the loss of Robert Carter's direct involvement left a palpable void. The defense struggled to marshal the same level of influence and confidence previously projected. Without the patriarch's imposing presence, their efforts sometimes faltered under the pressure of the prosecution's relentless advance. Inside the courtroom, Liam's demeanor shifted noticeably. The cocky bravado that once defined his appearances gave way to vulnerability. He listened intently as witnesses spoke, his gaze occasionally dropping to the floor, betraying the weight of the moment. The isolation was stark, the safety net he had counted on now absent, replaced by the cold realities of the trial. Observers noted the transformation with a mix of sympathy and sober acknowledgement. The young man who had once seemed invincible now appeared deeply human, flawed, frightened, and confronted by consequences he had not fully anticipated. Outside the courthouse, the community's engagement intensified. Local advocacy groups organized forums and discussions focused on youth violence and justice reform, using the trial as a catalyst to address broader systemic issues. Public demonstrations continued, their tone evolving from protest to a demand for lasting change. Media coverage remained relentless, chronicling each development with an eye toward the shifting dynamics. Commentators highlighted the prosecution's gains, noting the diminished influence of the Carter family and the increased likelihood of a fair trial. Editorials praised the perseverance of the legal team and the courage of witnesses coming forward despite intimidation. Within the prosecution's ranks, morale soared. Daniel Reyes acknowledged the challenges ahead, but expressed cautious optimism. In a rare interview, he remarked, "This case is about more than one incident. It's about ensuring that justice is accessible to all, that no one is above the law. The evidence is strong, and we are committed to seeing this through." The defense, meanwhile, re-evaluated its approach. Without Robert Carter's direct involvement, they sought to humanize Liam further, focusing on his background, the pressures of adolescence, and the potential for rehabilitation. They prepared to call character witnesses and experts on juvenile behavior, aiming to sway the jury's sympathies. Behind the scenes, negotiations between defense and prosecution hinted at the possibility of plea discussions, though nothing concrete emerged. Both sides weighed the risks and benefits, mindful of the public scrutiny and the implications of any agreement. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a microcosm of the tensions between privilege and accountability, youth and responsibility, power and justice. Each witness, each piece of evidence, contributed to a narrative that transcended the specifics of the case, reflecting broader societal struggles. For Liam Carter, the prosecution's momentum was a stark reminder that the promise of protection had given way to the harsh light of consequence. The community's hope for impartial justice now rested on the shoulders of the legal system, tested by the forces that had once seemed insurmountable. The trial was far from over, but the prosecution's gains signaled a turning point. Springfield watched closely as the pursuit of fairness unfolded, a collective breath held in anticipation of a verdict that would resonate far beyond the walls of the courthouse. The courtroom drama that had gripped Springfield took on a new dimension as Liam Carter's defense team scrambled to adjust to the shifting landscape left by his father's withdrawal. The once unassailable backing of Robert Carter was gone, and with it, the aura of invincibility that had long shielded Liam from the full force of scrutiny. Now, the defense faced the daunting challenge of navigating a prosecution emboldened by recent successes while managing the mounting pressure on their young client. Sarah Mitchell, the lead defense attorney, convened frequent strategy sessions with her team. The mood was tense but focused, a stark contrast to the earlier confidence that had accompanied Robert Carter's presence. They pored over evidence, testimony transcripts, and potential witness lists, seeking any avenue to introduce doubt or mitigate the impact of the prosecution's growing momentum. Mitchell's approach shifted noticeably. Where once the defense leaned heavily on influence and procedural challenges, they now emphasized Liam's youth and vulnerability. Their narrative sought to humanize the teenager caught in a moment of poor judgment rather than a cold-hearted aggressor. Character witnesses were prepared, psychologists and educators were lined up to testify about adolescent behavior, impulsivity, and the capacity for change. However, the emotional toll on Liam was palpable. The once cocky teenager appeared increasingly withdrawn during court appearances, his earlier bravado replaced by a guarded silence. Between sessions, he confided in his attorneys and family members, revealing a growing sense of isolation and anxiety. The absence of his father's protective presence left him exposed, grappling not only with the charges, but with a crumbling support system. Family dynamics added complexity to the defense's challenges. Liam's siblings and extended relatives stepped cautiously into the spotlight, attempting to offer support while navigating their own fears and uncertainties. Yet, the unity that had once seemed unshakable now showed signs of strain, as differing opinions on how to proceed surfaced behind closed doors. The public scrutiny intensified, with media outlets closely monitoring every courtroom exchange and family interaction. Reporters noted the subtle shifts in Liam's demeanor, the absence of Robert Carter's commanding presence, and the defense's recalibrated strategy. Social media buzzed with speculation about the family's internal struggles, amplifying the pressure on Liam and those around him. Within the courtroom, the defense faced mounting obstacles. Witnesses called by the prosecution remained steadfast, their testimonies consistent and detailed. Attempts to impeach their credibility met with limited success, as jurors appeared attentive and engaged. The introduction of video evidence and medical reports further solidified the prosecution's case, challenging the defense's efforts to sow reasonable doubt. Sarah Mitchell's cross-examinations became more measured, balancing assertiveness with caution to avoid alienating jurors. Despite her skill, the courtroom atmosphere favored the prosecution's narrative, leaving the defense searching for impactful moments to shift perceptions. Outside, community reactions mirrored the courtroom's tensions. Supporters of justice reform and victims' rights rallied around Marcus Hill's family, emphasizing the importance of accountability, especially for those from privileged backgrounds. Conversely, some sympathized with Liam, viewing him as a product of youthful mistakes and a system that often failed to address underlying issues. The ongoing trial placed a spotlight on Springfield's social fabric, exposing the fractures between wealth, power, and justice. Town hall meetings and community forums debated the case's broader implications, with residents voicing concerns about fairness, rehabilitation, and the influence of status on legal outcomes. Amid this backdrop, Liam's emotional resilience was tested repeatedly. Moments of vulnerability surfaced during private conversations, revealing fears about the future and the possibility of long-term consequences. His reliance on his defense team grew, as did his awareness that the path ahead would be fraught with hardship. Legal advisors cautioned the family about public statements and media interactions, emphasizing the need for discretion amid the heightened scrutiny. The defense's public relations efforts aimed to strike a balance between protecting Liam's image and acknowledging the seriousness of the charges. As the trial progressed, fractures within the Carter family's support network became more pronounced. Some members advocated for a more aggressive legal stance, pushing for plea negotiations or alternative sentencing options. Others urged acceptance of responsibility and a path toward rehabilitation, recognizing the potential damage prolonged litigation could inflict on all involved. The defense team grappled with these competing pressures, striving to maintain a coherent strategy while adapting to evolving circumstances. The absence of Robert Carter's guiding hand left a leadership vacuum, complicating decision-making and coordination. In the courtroom, Liam's interactions with his attorneys deepened, reflecting a growing dependence on their expertise and counsel. These moments underscored the transformation from a defiant youth to a defendant, confronting the weight of his actions and the realities of the legal process. The prosecution remained vigilant, capitalizing on the defense's vulnerabilities. Daniel Reyes and his team pressed forward with witness testimonies, expert analyses, and evidence presentations that reinforced the narrative of accountability. Their steadfast approach resonated with jurors and the community alike, reinforcing faith in the pursuit of justice. As the trial unfolded, the community's attention remained riveted. The case had evolved into a symbol of the broader struggle to balance privilege and responsibility, youth and accountability. For Liam Carter, the journey was no longer one of assumed protection, but of facing the consequences of choices made and the uncertain road ahead. Within the courtroom walls and beyond, the battle for justice played out with intensity and complexity. The defense's challenges were emblematic of the profound shifts occurring in the case. A young man's fate intertwined with family dynamics, legal strategy, and a community's demand for fairness. As the trial continued, the question lingered: could Liam's defense overcome the mounting evidence and public scrutiny, or would the absence of his father's influence prove insurmountable? The answer remained uncertain, casting a long shadow over the unfolding proceedings and the lives forever changed by the night that set it all in motion. The courtroom was charged with a mix of tension and anticipation as the trial entered its most critical phase. Days of testimony, cross-examinations, and legal wrangling had worn down the participants, but the dramatic moments now unfolding revealed the raw human emotions beneath the legal formalities. For Liam Carter, the proceedings were a crucible, testing not only his innocence or guilt, but his very character, under the watchful eyes of a jury and a community seeking justice. The prosecution called its key witnesses with deliberate precision. Marcus Hill's mother, Angela, took the stand with a quiet strength that resonated through the courtroom. Her voice, steady despite the pain etched on her face, recounted the night of the assault and the impact it had wrought on their family. "My son was just a kid who wanted to live his life," she said, tears welling, but her resolve unbroken. That night changed everything. We want justice, not just for Marcus, but for every family who fears violence. Witnesses from the party painted a vivid picture of chaos and fear. Their testimonies echoed each other, describing the sudden eruption of violence and Liam's role in the confrontation. Some spoke of confusion and panic, others of clear aggression. The cumulative weight of these accounts pressed heavily on the defense, challenging their efforts to cast doubt. In response, the defense sought to challenge the credibility and consistency of these witnesses. Sarah Mitchell's cross-examinations were sharp, aiming to highlight contradictions and motivate jurors to question the accuracy of fragmented memories under stress. Yet, the strategy met with mixed success, as many witnesses maintained their accounts with conviction. Amid these exchanges, Liam's courtroom demeanor evolved noticeably. Gone was the cocky teenager who once smirked through proceedings. Now he appeared increasingly vulnerable, his eyes often downcast, his posture subdued. When called to testify, Liam's voice was measured but tinged with uncertainty as he recounted his version of events. He described the party's confusion, his attempts to diffuse tensions, and the sudden violence that spiraled beyond control. His testimony revealed a young man caught between remorse and defense, struggling to reconcile his actions with the consequences. The jury's reactions were varied, some empathetic, others skeptical, mirroring the community's divided sentiments. Character witnesses called by the defense sought to humanize Liam further. Teachers spoke of his academic achievements and participation in community service, painting a picture of a promising youth derailed by one tragic moment. Friends testified to his kindness and remorse, emphasizing his regret and potential for rehabilitation. Psychologists provided expert testimony on adolescent behavior, highlighting impulsivity and the capacity for change. Their words aimed to shift the jury's focus from punishment to understanding, framing Liam's actions within the broader context of youth development. Despite these efforts, the prosecution's narrative maintained a firm grip on the courtroom. The physical evidence, medical reports detailing Marcus Hill's injuries, video footage from the night, and police testimony served as a consistent anchor. The prosecution underscored the lasting impact of the assault, emphasizing that the consequences extended beyond a single night to the very fabric of community safety. Throughout the trial, the jury grappled with the complexities before them. Jurors listened attentively to emotional testimonies, scrutinized conflicting accounts, and weighed expert analyses. Their deliberations would require balancing empathy for a troubled youth against the imperative of accountability. Outside the courthouse, the community remained deeply engaged. Vigils and memorials for Marcus Hill continued, serving as reminders of the human cost behind the legal proceedings. Local media chronicled the trial with intensity, capturing the emotional highs and lows that defined the courtroom. The Carter family's internal dynamics reflected the pressures of the trial. Liam's siblings and relatives faced their own struggles, torn between loyalty and the harsh realities of the case. Family gatherings grew strained, with conversations often shadowed by the looming verdict. Legal observers noted the trial's significance beyond Springfield. The case had become a touchstone for debates on juvenile justice, privilege, and the capacity for redemption. The outcome would reverberate far beyond the immediate parties involved, influencing public discourse and legal practices. As closing arguments approached, both prosecution and defense prepared to crystallize their narratives. The prosecution planned to emphasize the need for justice and community protection, while the defense aimed to appeal to compassion and the possibility of reform. For Liam Carter, the trial had been a transformative journey, from arrogance to vulnerability, from reliance on privilege to confronting the stark realities of his actions. The courtroom had exposed not only the facts of the case, but the deeper questions of responsibility, growth, and the meaning of justice. As the final testimonies concluded and the courtroom prepared for closing statements, the weight of the moment settled over all present. The jury faced the monumental task of sifting through evidence and emotion to render a verdict that would shape lives and define a community's commitment to fairness. In the stillness before the closing arguments, the echoes of the trial's journey lingered, a testament to the clash between youth and accountability, privilege and justice, and the enduring search for truth amid complexity. The courtroom was suffused with an air of solemn gravity as closing arguments commenced, the final act in a saga that had captivated Springfield and tested the very foundations of justice. Jurors sat forward, their faces etched with fatigue and contemplation, absorbing every word as attorneys sought to crystallize complex narratives into compelling verdicts. Daniel Reyes, the lead prosecutor, rose first. His voice carried the weight of conviction tempered by respect for the gravity of the moment. "This case is about accountability," he began, eyes sweeping the jury. "It is about recognizing that actions have consequences regardless of privilege or wealth. Marcus Hill was a young man with a future, whose life was violently altered by choices made that night. Justice is not just about punishment. It is about affirming the values that bind our community, protecting the vulnerable, and ensuring that no one is above the law." Reyes recounted the evidence with precision, the eyewitness testimonies, the video footage, the medical records. He painted a vivid picture of the assault's impact, not only on the victim, but on the community's sense of safety and trust. "This is about fairness," he concluded, "and about sending a clear message that violence will not be tolerated." The defense followed, led by Sarah Mitchell, who approached the jury with a measured, empathetic tone. "Liam Carter is not a monster," she urged. "He is a young man who made a terrible mistake, caught in a moment of chaos and poor judgment. We ask you to see beyond the headlines, beyond the privilege, and recognize the potential for growth and rehabilitation. Punishment without hope for change serves no one." Mitchell emphasized Liam's youth, his remorse, and the testimony of character witnesses who attested to his good nature before the incident. She cautioned against allowing anger or bias to overshadow the complexities of adolescence and the capacity for redemption. Our justice system is not just about retribution. It is about fairness, compassion, and the belief that people can change. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence as jurors retired to deliberate. Outside, a crowd gathered, their faces reflecting a spectrum of hope, anxiety, and resolve. The community awaited a verdict that would resonate far beyond the confines of the courthouse. Hours stretched into an agonizing wait. Inside the deliberation room, jurors wrestled with the weight of their responsibility, balancing evidence with empathy, facts with the human stories laid bare before them. The decision they faced would define not only Liam Carter's future, but the community's faith in a justice system striving to be blind to privilege. When the jury finally returned, the courtroom held its collective breath. Foreperson Linda Martinez, a middle-aged teacher with a steady calm, stood to deliver the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant Liam Carter guilty of aggravated assault. The words struck the room with profound finality. Liam's face betrayed a flicker of shock before settling into a resigned stillness. His family exchanged tense glances, the weight of reality settling over them like a heavy shroud. The judge, maintaining her dignified composure, proceeded to sentencing. She spoke with a measured voice that echoed the solemnity of the occasion. This court recognizes the complexity of youth and the potential for rehabilitation. However, it must also acknowledge the severity of the crime and its impact on the victim and community. In light of these factors, I hereby sentence Liam Carter to 5 years in a juvenile correctional facility, with provisions for counseling and educational programs aimed at rehabilitation. Her words underscored the balance struck between accountability and the hope for redemption, a sentence that sought to reflect both justice served and a path forward. As the gavel fell, the courtroom's tension gave way to a chorus of subdued reactions. Supporters of Marcus Hill acknowledged the sentence as a measure of justice, while some in Liam's circle grappled with the harshness of the outcome. The community's emotions were raw, a mixture of relief, sorrow, and reflection. In the moments that followed, Liam's composure faltered. The facade of detachment cracked, revealing a young man overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions and the absence of the protective shield he had once believed inviolate. Tears welled in his eyes as the reality of his sentence sank in, a poignant reminder of the journey from privilege to accountability. Outside the courthouse, Marcus Hill's family expressed a tempered sense of closure. Angela Hill spoke softly yet firmly. "This verdict honors Marcus's courage and the pain our family has endured. We hope it serves as a reminder that justice must be equal for all." The media captured the scene, framing the verdict as a watershed moment for Springfield, a community confronting the challenges of privilege, responsibility, and fairness. For Robert Carter, the sentence marked an end to a public ordeal that had tested family bonds and influence. The absence he had created by walking out of the courtroom earlier now took on a new resonance, a silent acknowledgment of the limits of power in the face of justice. Liam's journey was far from over. The sentence, while severe, included opportunities for rehabilitation, a chance to reckon with his actions and forge a new path. The courtroom had witnessed the fall of a privileged youth, but also the emergence of a reckoning that transcended status. As the courthouse emptied and the city absorbed the verdict, Springfield faced its own reflection. The trial had exposed fractures and tensions, but also a collective commitment to fairness and the rule of law. It was a moment that challenged assumptions, demanded accountability, and highlighted the complexities of justice in a world where privilege and consequence often collide. In the quiet aftermath, Liam Carter's sobs echoed as a sobering testament to the price of choices made and the hope for redemption. The laughter that once filled the courtroom was replaced by a profound silence, a silence carrying the weight of loss, growth, and the enduring pursuit of justice.